Right, good morning ladies and gentlemen and members. Welcome to this meeting of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority. This meeting is being held at our Fire and Police Shared Headquarters at Eastleigh. The meeting is being recorded for broadcast on the authority's website and will be available for repeated viewings. Press and members of the public are also permitted to film and broadcast this meeting. Those remaining at the meeting are consenting to be filmed and recorded, and to the possible use of those images and recordings for broadcasting purposes. There is no fire alarm scheduled for today, so if it goes off, out that door, turn left, into the car park, follow someone in uniform, will be your safest route. Microphones, you know how they work. Switch them off, please, when you're not using them, otherwise they dilute the volume. So, item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Katie, please.
We've received apologies from Councillor George Madwick and also from Donna Jones, Police and Crime Commissioner.
And
Can I just say, regarding David is, as you all know, has got a problem with his back, but he's seeing a consultant next week, so hopefully things might be able to improve. He did attend the standards board, and which was very good of him in doing so, but it is difficult for him to get out of bed because he spends most of his time in bed at the moment, so he's apologetic he's not here.
we wish him well. Thank you. Okay, item 2, declarations of interest. Members, anything to declare of interest in either now or at the relevant point in the agenda? Anything? No, thank you. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. If anyone has any comments on it. It's very impressive, item 193 in the minutes, which deals with members' involvement. I mean, I think it looks really good, and it just shows that we do things as we are meant to do. So I'm grateful to you, and please do keep that going. Nothing on the minutes? No? Okay. There are no deputations. Chairman's announcements. That's me. On behalf of the authority, I would like to welcome Councillor Nick Chard, who's Chairman of Kent and Medway Fire and Rescue Authority, and his 2 officers, Marie and Owen. So I'm Welsh, I should have got that right, shouldn't I? You are most welcome to have a look at what we do. Today is Mental Health Day. We do produce a mental health toolbox. If you look on the website, there's lots of stuff on there. Molly, it's your department. Any comment on today?
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, it is World Mental Health Day, which we're pleased to be celebrating and supporting within our organisation. As the Chairman has already pointed out, we do have our mental health toolbox, and I've got some extra copies of this today if any members would like to take it away to have a look at. I just want to draw attention to our over 100 mental health first aiders who work across the service providing support to employees at times when they're struggling with their mental health, and they're a huge asset to our organisation and do so on a voluntary basis, so I'd like to recognise those workers today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Molly. Next item is earthquake support. 5 of our specialist search and rescue firefighters were deployed to Morocco as part of the UK International Search and Rescue Team, providing specialist help following their devastating earthquake. Members of our team were managing base operations in Morocco for the UK firefighting teams, ensuring the welfare and safety of those involved in the search and rescue operations. Whilst in Morocco, the UK team received a letter from Mohammed VI, King of Morocco, thanking them for their assistance with their operation. And I extend thanks on behalf of the authority to them. Was that published a lot in the press and things?
Less so. I mean, I think, Chairman, the number of national events happening mean those things aren't always in the top line of press. But thank you for your words. I'll pass on to the team. I guess members remind my members why we do this, in as much as we have a fantastic team that belong to the International Search and Rescue community, And what it means, their experience not only of helping those poor individuals across the other side of the world and wherever they go, but actually they bring back that skill and experience to Hampshire, Isle of Wight and the communities. Those skills and experience, thankfully, they don't have here. But should they ever need to, at least we know they've been through that process before and experienced those really quite extreme events. But obviously our hearts and minds go out to the people of Morocco and other places in the world currently that are going through devastating impacts.
Okay, thanks. Next up, multi-agency exercise LiveX 2023. On Wednesday the 4th of October, a large multi-agency exercise was hosted here at Service Headquarters. This was LiveX 2023 exercise arranged by the local Resilience Forum. The exercise was led by the Environment Agency and developed with all partner agency. It involved approximately 300 participants and was focused on a severe weather flood-based exercise. This included setting up a strategic coordinating centre at headquarters and 2 tactical centres, one on the mainland and one on the Isle of Wight. The exercise purpose was to rehearse multi-agency tactical and strategic response and how partner agencies reacted to information as if it was a real event. This was an excellent opportunity for testing joint plans, the ability to understand what was going on, shared situational awareness, collective decisions, and the creation of tactical plans such as an evacuation. Chief, any further comments?
Thanks, Chairman. I think it's those members that are involved also. I know a number of you were involved in one way or another. There's a saying we use in the Resilience Forum, which I chair, is you don't learn to dance on the way to a ball. And so the idea of exercising, the idea of working together so well over the periods of the year, we run one big exercise every so often, and that really does test and stress those relationships to make sure that we are we know what each other are doing, we know what agencies will come forward, we know how and who we'd speak to given the real thing happening. So it's really important. I'm really proud of the fact that the Hampshire Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service plays such an important role to hosting the Resilience Forum across all of our agencies across this space to keep our communities safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Next item, live fire facilities. This authority has invested 3.6 million in a state-of-the-art live fire training facility at the service headquarters, which you can see on the other side of the car park. The new building provides realistic burning with multi-floor and scenario-based training to further support our operational teams in their development. The facility will be handed over on the 6th of October to start test burning with our first students in the middle of October. Chief, anything to add?
As you can imagine, our team is delighted with a new toy like this. It's an amazing bit of kit, and thank you to Matt and his team on estates for building such a fantastic capacity and capability. So the kit will make sure our firefighters are trained for the modern world they work in, and will provide hot fire training to make sure that they are safe and capable of dealing with whatever comes their way. So I'm really delighted and grateful for the Fire Authority for the funding that led to that fantastic bit of kit. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
If I may, Chair, on behalf of Councillor Price and myself, we would ask there is no live fire action today as our cars are parked in the activity. Okay.
Lucky to have any parking at all. Yeah. Now, some of you, actually no, none of you except for Councillor Price and me, will remember Councillor Jeff Hockley, who, well, you will do from other things, but he was a member of this fire authority from June 19 to May 21, who sadly passed away. His funeral took place at St Peter's Church, Titchfield. Here is the race card if you want to see it. He was good company, Jeff. He had been a colonial policeman, and all the wonderful stories that came with him will be remembered by us all. So he will be missed. Okay, item 6 then on the agenda, members' development. Let me kick this off. On the 26th of July, which seems so long ago now, there was a Prince's Trust sessions in lunchtime in the Isle of Wight and in the evening at Basingstoke, which I went to, both in one day. Pretty impressive stuff. 8th of September, there was a plaque unveiling ceremony at St Mary's, Southampton, in memory of the 2 firefighters who lost their lives in the Shirley Towers fire, which was beautifully organised by the fire station. I mean, it really went like clockwork. It was very emotional, very well organised, and I think they did a good job, chiefly. And I got to have a ride on the way back in a fire engine, which was wonderful. On the 9th of September, I attended Basingstoke Fire Station's open day. Really hot day it was, as was the day before, but terrific effort, and I couldn't have faulted it. Actually, the one fault I would make is that there was only one ice cream van, and if there'd been three, the queue wouldn't have gone to Andover.
First of all, George has sent me a note which he'd like me to read out, and that's under this item. It says, "Dear members, I apologise for my absence today. I wanted to give you a short update on what I've been working on, especially recently. I've managed to attend 3 fire station open days in Hampshire over the last few months. Myself and a number of my independent colleagues had a fantastic time at the Cosham Fire Station open day, and the turnout was overwhelming. Fire open days are a brilliant way of engaging the local community in the work we do, as well as educating people, including children, on fire safety and the work our firefighters do. We also attended the 999 Day at Port Solent that had a turnout at almost 10,000 people across the day. We managed to see some old fire trucks, which were fascinating. Other than that, I was given an update on the new fire station complex being built in Portsmouth and was able to get answers to a number of concerns that local residents had. Equally, a number of issues were raised by officers in relation to Portsmouth City Council's involvement with road infrastructure and potential traffic issues in relation to the new site. The leader of the council and the cabinet member for traffic and transportation has been briefed on the issues, and they are speaking with officers and assured me a response shortly in relation to this. The new complex in Portsmouth is very welcomed by our city and its residents, and we continue to have much admiration and respect for the officers and their service to our community. Thank you." So that's George. For myself, I've attended a number of events since the last fire authority meeting. I'll go through them by date, and then I will make some comments about the individual ones. The 7th of September, I attended the LGA members briefing. 8th of September, I went to Sandown Prince's Trust. 14th of September, the Saab pension meeting. 19th of September, the Saab pension conference on the first day. The 22nd of September, Fire Commission, and also on the same day, the EDI meeting in the afternoon. And then the 6th of October, I attended the Fire Service Management Committee. Taking them, going through the members' briefing day, that was fairly straightforward. That was really a briefing for members who are new to the LGA committee structure, and it was quite interesting. Although I've been there before, it was quite interesting to hear the different speakers of what was going on within the LGA. The Sandown Princess Trust, I attended that with Karen, and I don't know what Karen might say about it, but from my point of view, I found it very good, excellent in actual fact organisation-wise, but it's very disappointing the lack of parents turning up to support their young people. And I think that is a problem. And I was talking there to somebody who was a volunteer, and he was saying that one of the things with the Princess Trust, we do all the work with them at the station, and then when the course is finished, they're on their own. And if they have a problem, they don't really know where to go. And I think that may be something which we need to pick up within the Princess Trust, or it may be covered and he may have the wrong information. I don't know. The Saab pension meeting, well, the saga of the issues to do with pensions continues to roll on, but we're, I think, almost there, and hopefully that's all now going to be sorted. The pensions conference, again, I only went to the first day, and that was interesting of what was going on. It was more generality about the pensions. I didn't attend the second day, which was more about the mechanics of what has to be done. Then we come to the Fire Commission, which, as the chairman has mentioned, we both attended. I think the main points from that was there was a discussion about RAC in our estates, and advice was given on that of firefighting, giving advice to firefighters, and the legal responsibility of the service. Finance, again, as we know, we had the luxury of the percentage or £5 last year on our council tax, and there is agreed that this is what we should put forward again to the government to try and get the same opportunity to do the same this coming year. There was also a point about letters being sent from the chief and the chairman, and I don't know whether Hampshire has sent its letter in. Hopefully it has, and I'm sure, looking at the nodding heads, it has been, so that is good, because the more pressure that comes from within the service of the reasoning behind why these things are needed within the service, then that gives pressure for the Home Office to argue with the Treasury. The HMIC FRS misconduct review a report is coming out in June 24 after an inspection for 3 months. The one thing which surprised me is that energy there's 161 sites of battery storage across the country. And that's quite staggering. I don't know how many of them are in Hampshire. And then the College of Fire was a confidential item. So that was that one. Then the EDI meeting in the afternoon was very straightforward and discussing things which we would have expected. Fire Service Management Committee. The NSCC working on more publicity and on climate change, and that the NFCC toolkit on climate change, and then I got it mentioned through my group spokesperson about what we have done with Australia and America. So that was good for us. The finance one was again covered the same as the Fire Commission. And one of the things in toxicity in fires was mentioned by an individual, and it's something which I think needs to be really taken up, and probably maybe have to discuss it more within the report we've got here on our own agenda, and that is that if you're a member of the armed services, that is on your doctor's record, so they know that there's anything related to that. It can look at sort of when they go for a consultation, that if you get to see the doctor, that they can aware of it. But a firefighter is not on there, and it's something which certainly I think is felt that if a person is a firefighter, it should be on their medical records, so that if they go there, then the doctors will be aware of what sort of things, and particularly when we're talking about the hazards from all the toxicity within fires and other things which they're dealing with. And I think that's it. That's me.
Thank you, Roger. Yeah, the letter went out to the government on Friday.
Sorry.
The letter of which you mentioned went out to the government on Friday.
Good. Right, thank you.
And I did. Molly, is this toxicity issue fall under your remit and medical records?
Yes, it does, yeah.
Could you look into it?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Great, thanks. Thanks. Sally, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. As you might have seen, you've got a picture next to you. This was Southampton Pride event, the end of August, pictured with the Hampshire and Isle of Wight at the stand there. So that was one event I went to. Also, I would like to say thanks to Wight Watch at Redbridge Fire Station for saving the day. You may have seen on BBC News and in the Daily Echo that the school where I'm a school governor at Shirley Warren in Southampton has what they call a pop-up swimming pool, which just lowers the costs involved of transporting children to local swimming pools. So it's like a new thing, but it would have taken a week to fill it with a hose pipe, and that's a week less of swimming lessons that the children wouldn't have had. So I said that I would get my contacts in, and yeah, Wight Watch saved the day. So I said that I'd give them a bit of a mention today to thank them. I also met with the station commander at St Mary's, Pete McClaremont, around the work that we're doing on EDI. I visited a Gurdwari in the city centre, a Sikh temple, with Pete, just talking to people there and encouraging them to, and letting them know what the fire service was all about. And I've also had a meeting, a briefing with some other local councillors on the update of the plans for Redbridge Fire Station and the upgrade that's hopefully going to be taking place sometime next year. I think that was it from me. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Karen.
Hello. So just to touch on LiveX, I came it was a couple of weeks ago now to do media training here, and that was brilliant. But it was great to see how everything works together, and I had to be questioned by the media, so that was interesting. So talking about the event that me and Roger went to at Sandown on the Isle of Wight, that was actually a taster session. So that was a just 5-day taster session, and it's the first one that's been on the Isle of Wight. So those young people that were there, it was their first time of getting out and seeing if they liked it. And I believe out of the 8 that were there, 5 signed up to the Prince's Trust full time. So I think that's probably why there wasn't as many people there, because it was a 5-day thing and some people had come and some people hadn't. But I'd expect to see them hopefully on the next full-time 12-week one, which leads me into the last Prince's Trust event that I went to. As always very emotional, and I get swept away by stories and of courage and resilience, so that's great. And I also visited all the fire stations on the Isle of Wight and looked at all the upgrades that have happened, so thank you to the authority for that in the budget. And I think the teams on the island really enjoy seeing that we've put some money into the estate, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. Zoe, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I congratulate members as the Children and Young People's Champion. It's great to hear that we're all getting out and going to the celebrations of both the Prince's Trust and the Cadet Programme. Just to extend that slightly, if you want to visit the schools programme, so the main schools programme that we do, and also the Firewise programme, I'm meeting with the delivery team on the 18th of November. So if you want to expand your visit and expand that to schools, if you want to get in touch with myself, I can have that discussion with the delivery team for the schools programme. So on the 27th of July, I attended the Prince's Trust passing out at Redbridge. Always a fantastic event, like you say, Karen. You know, parents do attend those programmes, which is fantastic. You mentioned briefly the taster programmes. So what they're starting to do is almost a pipeline leading in to make sure that they have the numbers for the programmes. There is also an aspiration to expand the Prince's Trust, hence why they're trialling the taster programme. So it was great that you attended that. I met with the delivery manager for Children and Young People on the 13th of September to talk about their aspirations, their direction, to talk about the cadet programmes. So they're currently 4 cadet programmes, the Prince's Trust programmes and the school programme, to see how I can help. Roger, you mentioned obviously the next steps of where they go on to. it may be that I can ask the delivery manager maybe to come to APAC to deliver a briefing of how they link in with that. Because we also discussed the staffing, the structure, because there's been some changes. We also discussed safeguarding and residentials and the IED space. And also, obviously, the next steps or the advice and guidance that they get. So I can ask maybe Joe to bring that and we can have a briefing, if that helps. But thank you.
Okay, thanks. Fran.
Yeah, as you know, I've had a family bereavement recently, so I haven't been able to go to any of the arranged events that have been on. But I had an unexpected event happen just 300 yards from my house, and I just wanted to say how fantastic the fire brigade reacted to this. A big house on Barton-on-Sea seafront sadly was set alight. We don't quite know the details of what happened. But I was actually witness to everything that went on, and I just stood there watching in amazement what the firefighters did and how they worked it. It's a big house, roof on fire. It was quite something to see, very sad to see, because this is one of the most beautiful houses in Barton, unfortunately. But there were lots of vehicles there from different areas of Hampshire, so that was interesting to see how they all came together as a team. The what do you call it, command vehicles were there. It was just interesting to see how the people in charge organised the teams. We had a cherry picker going up to the roof. The smoke was phenomenal, and they had their breathing apparatus on, so it was a real learning experience, one that I didn't really want to have, but it was fascinating to watch. And one of my neighbours also got the gentleman who lived there out of the house with a retired police officer who happened to be on hand, which was interesting. But I just want to say thank you for the teams who were there, because that was something to observe. I put the videos of this on my Facebook page, and if anybody's interested, it's all there to see. And I tried to capture as much as I could of the vehicles and the actual operation and the smoke and the people up in the cherry picker. So thank you to the fire service for that.
Thank you, Fran. Any more members? Yes, Sally.
Sorry, just to come back, just a couple of apologies from me. I really wanted to attend the event at Shirley Towers, but I was working that day, unfortunately. And also the event that you went to, Zoe, I was working again, and I got one of my local councillors, so at least someone from the City Council was there for the Prince's Trust event, because I felt like someone should be there from the city, considering it was at Redbridge Fire Station. So just thought I'd add that.
Okay, fine. No more? Hugh.
Thank you, Chair. Two very quickly. BW visit this afternoon. Thank you for whoever organised that. Looking forward to it. And then separately, like Fran, a vote of thanks for Dropford. A friend of mine was out cycling recently. Had a heart attack. Sadly died, but Dropford were the first people in attendance. Amazing response, so thank you to them. Sorry, the voice is even worse today.
Thanks, Hugh. Thanks. Derek.
Well, just quite simply, on the line of Prince's Trust, Basingstoke, attended Rushmore Cadets, I think was in this qualifying period as well, attended that. Other than that, pretty light. But I would just like to point out that we will be undertaking some more training activity, which is for member development, linked with primarily legal side and pensions, etc. I don't know what the date's going to be, because dates have been bandied around which are inappropriate, so we'll sort that one out. But other than that, that's about it for me on member development, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, members. Item 7 on the agenda, page 9 in your pack, deals with QI budget update report. So I would invite Catherine to give your report, please.
Sorry. There we go, that's better. Good morning, members. So I'm just going to present a routine update of the financial position at the end of Q1, so at the end of June 2023. It's relatively early in the year, so there's still some uncertainty over the position. And the main focus of this report is the current year, as we don't have really very much information about either cost pressures or funding for next year, but we do cover a little bit about our known cost pressures within the report. So paragraphs 8 to 13 cover off the standard revenue budget monitoring position, which is an forecast underspend of nearly £900,000. So it's worth highlighting that there are still a couple of fairly major points of uncertainty. We're still seeing the impact of non-pay inflation. In general inflation in the economy doesn't necessarily translate in a straightforward way into price inflation for the kind of goods and services that the fire service purchase. So we're, as officers, keeping a close eye on that. Also, the position reflects the current pay offer for the Green Book or staff pay award, and that hasn't yet been resolved, so there's a possibility that that could change. So the major factor in this underspend is a significant underspend on on-call firefighters, which is partially offset by mainly inflation-related pressures on staff and on non-pay costs. So I think it could well be a point for discussion about this underspend on on-call firefighters, because that is not a planned underspend, and that is a reflection of the lack of availability and also of the relatively quiet summer to the point of this report. Paragraphs 14 to 17 just briefly cover that we are on track to deliver both cashable and non-cashable efficiency savings in this financial year. Paragraphs 18 to 22 talk about unknown delivery pressures. So these paragraphs start with a reminder that currently, based on the previous medium-term financial plan, we're starting the financial year with a forecast deficit of approximately £2 million. And that's based on prudent assumptions from last year about costs and funding changes. So I'll be bringing a fully updated medium-term financial plan in December 2023. But it is an opportunity to flag a number of pressures that are likely to impact on our position next year. So firstly, the control system procurement, which was covered by an exempt item at the July authority, plus changes to the HR service, which are item 8 on this agenda, and our approach to managing fire contaminants, which are covered as item 11 on this agenda. Paragraphs 23 to 24 just cover our progress on the capital programme. And then paragraphs, and that's backed up by an appendix and a confidential appendix with a further breakdown of the detail on the capital programme. Paragraphs 25 to 32 cover our reserves, balance sheet and treasury management position. And I think there is a helpful graph in paragraph 28 which shows our actual and forecast reduction in reserve balances. It's just worth reminding members that our reserve balances have been sort of exceptionally high, mainly due to delays in the capital programme. So this reduction in reserve balances is a good thing in that we note the progress in delivering the capital programme, but it's just worth highlighting that graph. In this section, it also covers the sale of some pooled funds. So members may recall that these are investments we've held for a number of years, and they've generated significant income returns for the Fire Authority during a period when our reserve balances were high and when interest rates were exceptionally low. So they have been a really good investment for the Fire Authority. But circumstances have now changed. So our reserve balances are decreasing, so we in effect no longer have as much short-term surplus cash, but also interest rates have increased, meaning that we can get better income returns just from investing in standard financial products available on the market. So on the basis of this, and in line with our treasury management strategy, we have sold approximately half of the pooled funds, Unfortunately, this resulted in a capital loss of nearly £19,000. And although that is unfortunate, it needs to be considered in the context of the approximately £1 million of additional income we generated over the 5 to 6 year period when those pooled funds were held. And then the final part to highlight from this report is the position on the statement of accounts, which is covered in paragraphs 33 to 35. So the deadline for the approval of the audited accounts was the 30th of September 2023. And this deadline has passed without the accounts being signed off. Actually, the audit hasn't yet begun, so we were not expecting the accounts to be signed off. This is part of a national issue, and the Department of Levelling Up Communities and Homes, I think that's the right way around, are progressing this issue as a national issue with the local audit market. We have discussed it extensively at the Standards and Governance Committee, but I thought it was just worth flagging to the authority that that deadline has now passed. So once we have further information, which will be coming nationally rather than locally, I'll provide you with a further update, as well as keeping the Standards and Governance Committee up to date. So I'm very happy to take any questions.
Derek.
Thank you, Catherine. As always, a very comprehensive and very good report, even though some of the reading isn't perhaps quite what we'd like as we start planning for next year's budgets as much as reflecting on the past. I have to touch on again the big underspend on on-call firefighters. It does become an operational matter, and we try to avoid that. But when we've only got 55% availability on on-call firefighters, when parts of the county are dependent on on-call firefighters, shouldn't we be looking
There you go, there's one.
Okay.
Just don't fiddle with that one.
Thank you, Mother. Just before I lost the thread there, 1.7 million. We're investing with some of our capitalisation programme is on on-call stations. We're visiting one this afternoon. I think Bishop's Waltham's entirely on-call, isn't it? Yeah. And I think we are in a situation where it's having a massive impact on our finances, on capital programme and on revenue operating. So I do urge that you do come forward with the plans, Glenn, and that you're looking at, because I personally feel we need on-call firefighters, of course we do, but if there's no resource and we can't schedule them into our rosters and to meet their requirements, then I think we're going to have to look long-term on this one. Just feel that this should be recorded, Chair, that it's now becoming a big exercise in my eyes anyway. Okay.
Okay, noted. Hugh, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Catherine, for another great report. Para 22, page 12. Can you give more detail on the issue here and the sums involved, please?
So I think if we're happy to leave that to Matt's paper, which is item 11 on this agenda, there's a paper that covers the total, a high-level figure of the total cost of the work, and more details about sort of the situation. So it comes up later on this same agenda.
Can we just ask then? So if we approve the contaminants plan, that would be budget busting in the medium term.
So I don't think we'd be in a good position to, in effect, approve something that was budget busting. What we would need to do is, and for both of the papers on this agenda that consider requests for additional funding, we'd need to, the approval would be to include them in the medium-term financial plan and budget. So I would say it's very unlikely that we would be able to afford all of the elements of the contaminants work within our budget for next year. But what it's doing is an indication that the Fire Authority is supportive of including them in the budget, subject to affordability. But we obviously can't approve spend which exceeds our resources. So it would have to, it's factoring that into our medium-term plan.
Okay. Roger.
Thank you, Sally. Catherine, I'm sorry to say this, but on the paragraph 8, your chart, I don't think the figures add up. The paper that I have in front of me, if you take the whole time firefighters, it shows that there's a £5,000 differential there. I think it should be a minus 231. I also think that the staff has got 182,000, should be 418, and if you put those two figures in there, that then adds up to the figure at the bottom.
Apologies for that, Councillor Price. I will make sure that we get an updated version. I'm very confident that the final column is correct. So something has obviously gone wrong with the forecast column. So we'll make sure we get an updated version of that for the minutes. Right. So apologies for that.
And the forecast column at the moment adds up to the total at the bottom. And that's what worried me, because I thought, well, if that adds up right, then that's going to throw the whole lot out if the other ones at the end are right. So I'll leave it to you to sort out what's right.
I'm very confident the bottom line figure and the variance column are correct. So it will be an adjustment, but apologies for that, and we will get that corrected for the minutes.
Right, thank you. Going on from that, I mean, I take up the point that Derek has made about the on-call, and if the on-call wasn't that 1,702, that would then turn our underspend into a £840,000 loss. And that is something which I think the authority should be very much aware of, because there is the need to get the on-call up to the numbers. I don't think we will get up to the full complement that quickly, because there's the time it takes to, once they've been interviewed, as I understand it, to time from that point. Well, first advertising, getting them, agreeing that they're suitable, and then going through the training is quite a long period of time. And I think that in some ways we need to look at that to see if we can shorten that to get them qualified but into position. The other part of it, and I think which really rings home to me, is there's two reports on this agenda, and that is the item 8 and item 11. I think they're grossly underestimated at cost, and I think that that is going to be having a full effect upon the budget, because the HR, and I'm not going to raise the HR issues here, I'll deal with them when we get to the report, but I personally think that there's a lot more funding needed and will be required for a specific part of the HR which is not included or doesn't appear to be included in the agenda item. So I highlight that one. And the toxicity one, I pick up the point that Hugh made. That is a serious situation under health and safety at work. And I think the timescale which is being proposed is too long. And we'll take that up at that particular point in the agenda. But I think as we're talking about finance, I'm just saying to the Treasurer, these are the highlights I see that we have coming seriously. Thank you.
David?
Yes, thank you very much. A general question, Catherine, about your report. I was just wondering what, in the context of this quarter, gives you most concern and the most worry while during your sleepless nights, worrying about these things, and also on the converse, the joy, happiness, and surprise. What have you found during the last when you've been putting this report together that's made you happy and feel positive about the things that you put and presented to us?
That's a very good and an unusual question. Thank you. So I think in terms of worries, I think it is concerns about the fact that we know inflation is causing us a significant underlying pressure. And as members have noted, at the moment our underspend on on-call firefighters is really helping us out overall, but that isn't an underspend that we're seeking to achieve. So I suppose part of my concern is we know we've got these pressures coming and we've got inflation, and how do we make sure that we can live within our current financial envelope but also make progress on some of these key issues that are identified in future papers. As I've mentioned previously, we don't have a great deal of certainty about our financial position until very late on in the financial year, and I'm anticipating that being the same this year. But hopefully the December budget update will provide us our best assumptions about what the position is, and that will sort of hopefully allay some of those fears. In terms of joy, I don't think joy is something that finance people often discuss.
Just giving you an opportunity to express.
I suppose for me, what is really an incredibly positive part of the service is that the budget managers within the service really take budget management very seriously. They all consider very carefully how they spend their money, and they also flag very promptly if there are going to be any concerns. So I think if we went back in time, there may have been situations where we would have had major financial pressures that emerged during the year. What's really positive here is we're taking a forward look. So we're saying these are things we are concerned about next year. We're able to flag them early, but that is down to sort of the importance which budget managers within the service place on their finances. So I think that's the key really, and that's what will make things work well.
Just as on a comeback on that, I think it would be really helpful if we send a real positive thank you very much to the budget managers, who are obviously providing a level of happiness and joy in a department that, as you said, Catherine, probably isn't known for its over enthusiasm in those sorts of areas. But no, I think that's good. And uncertainty as well. I suppose one would expect those who look after the accounts to be most concerned about uncertainty, and inflation is obviously a challenge for all of us because we're not quite sure where it's going. Hopefully down. Thank you.
Chief, you'd like to join in?
Join in the joy, I thought, actually. I just want to go back to a couple of points we made about the on-call underspend, but indeed the on-call staff. Just to make it really clear, I think it's right to flag and to be concerned, that we all are concerned about the ability to recruit. This is not about managers not recruiting them. This is about people not being available to recruit to do the jobs we need. it would be pointless paying people to do a job that we don't need. And so that money in the past would have been spent on firefighters doing the same job somebody else was doing, and therefore providing cover we don't need. So the fact we've got an underspend there is it helps in the short term in terms of because then managers can adjust their budget to spend the money on the things they need to spend. That's the point about budget managers. So be careful not to extrapolate too much from quarter one in that regard. But there is an ongoing broader issue about how we find the right people to be on-call firefighters, which I think was the point you're making, Derek, about an ongoing more concerning issue around our society changing, and that's happening across the country. In fact, it's happening in the Western world, I think it's fair to say, and as much as the idea of being able to get volunteers and others to give their time up to do these roles is much, much harder. All credit to those who do, and they do it for very little return, to be fair to them, and this budget is set aside for obviously paying for those firefighters should we find them. So there's no systematic problem in terms of our organisation. We can always be faster, yes, we can always be better, we can always keep people longer, but actually society is changing so dramatically we're not able to keep up, and that's one of the challenges. So there's two things perhaps to stress. One, it's not about managers not bothering recruiting, and we get a fair bit of hassle from our own stations saying, can we recruit please? Yes, you can always recruit the right people to cover the right gaps that we have in our availability. We can't recruit people that we don't need because that's just wasting public money. And the other part is Catherine's joy around our good budget managers. They are very good at using the funds they've got to achieve the outcomes if we've set them. And if they can't recruit people to do those jobs in terms of those on-call period, we'll be using them to cover in other spaces. So we're using that money to do a different thing. So the money is there for that purpose should it be needed. But thanks for the opportunity to just straighten that one out.
Thanks, Chief. Sally.
Thank you, Chair. Just a little cheeky opportunity while we're talking about on-call firefighters. My friend's husband has just completed his course, Alex Milligan, for Botley Fire Station. So I understand he did his training on the Isle of Wight. I don't know if Glenn can enhance that a little bit more and let us know how many were on that training day and how many new on-call firefighters we've got. But yeah, congratulations to Alex.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure how many were on that course, but the courses are run, they are scheduled to run every year. We do look to fill these courses, so they are scheduled in. And the trouble we have is often that they run light because we simply can't get people to do the right cover. But I'm very pleased to hear that we've got a new on-call firefighter at Botley, and thank you for your help, I'm sure, in recruiting that person. But yeah, and I would please, I'd ask for everybody's help really in this space, because we do need to continue to drive our recruitment. The courses are available; it's filling them which becomes the issue.
Okay. Karen, please.
I was going to ask a very similar question to David, so I'm going to change now. But I think probably we need to look at the Isle of Wight, because obviously we've got quite a contained area, so we need to do some work around that. I think maybe together on communities, etc. But trust me to ask a silly question. I don't know what the Network Fire Services Partnership is, and why we're running higher than budget for that. So can you tell me about that, please?
So the Network Fire Services Partnership, and Glenn can correct me when I go wrong, is our own control partnership, which is currently with 2 other services and is expanding. Currently they're doing a complex procurement, and so there are some additional costs that are in excess of budget, but we're working hard to make sure that we can bring that back in line.
I remember that now. Thank you very much for reminding me.
Derek?
Yeah, just Catherine, again on the subject, the most important thing, bringing joy for Catherine today. You mentioned something about the audits have not been signed off. They haven't been signed by Ernst Young, but they have been signed off by the council.
Yeah, so the committee have signed off our draft accounts, and so when the audit is either completed or there is a statutory arrangement in place that means the audit won't be completed, then if there's substantial changes needed, they'll return to the committee, and otherwise we'll have closed off that process. But the committee has signed off the accounts. It's just that they're unaudited accounts, and we would have expected in normal times for those to be audited accounts by that deadline.
Okay, anybody else on this? I mean, we are being asked to note these issues. I mean, I'm I've known Catherine for a long time. I don't expect her to be joyous. She's an accountant. But I do believe she has a phenomenal grip on what we do, and therefore I trust her implicitly. So if we can move to the recommendation then, please, on page 18. That this forecast outturn position for the financial year 22-23 be noted by this full authority, that the updated capital programme forecasts, Appendix A1 and 2, be noted by this full authority, that the quarterly prudential indicators, Appendix B, be noted by this full authority, that the quarterly Treasury Management Update Report, including the Treasury Management Indicators, Appendix C, be noted by this full authority, and that the sale of pooled fund investment, paragraph 32, be noted by this full authority. Noted? Agreed? Good. Thank you very much. Catherine, any final closing joyous notes?
No more joy, thank you.
Too much joy in a day. Are you, ladies and gentlemen, are you comfortable to carry on, or do you want a break? Oh, who wants a break? Anybody? No, we'll carry on. Okay. Item 8 then deals with funding for the in-house HR team and can be found on page 41 of your pack. And I would invite Molly Rowland to introduce this, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I'm very pleased to be able to present this report today, seeking investment in our new in-house HR team, which will become embedded within our organisation from April 24. The report in front of you outlines 3 options for your consideration today and recommends approving funding for a team that's best able to meet the requirements of our service now and into the future, including addressing a number of people challenges that the authority are already aware of, such as our increased sickness absence, improving our managers' confidence in HR processes, providing additional support for on-call employees, who we've discussed quite a bit already today, and responding to sector-wide concerns about culture and values and behaviours within the fire and rescue services. So members are aware that we currently receive our HR service through the Shared Services Partnership with the County Council and Constabulary, and that we've been part of this arrangement for almost 10 years. During that time, there have been significant developments within the fire sector, and I've outlined some of those within paragraphs 6 to 8 of the report. But these have led to different expectations of an HR service and a requirement for us to, for our HR provision to be aligned with the cultural aspirations of the organisation. Perhaps more importantly than the sector-wide challenges are the experiences of our managers and staff within the organisation, and as part of considering what we need moving forward, we spoke to managers across our organisation about the offering they would like to see improved as we bring an HR service back in-house. So they've specifically talked about wanting improved HR support, so a more proactive approach to HR support that works in partnership with managers. Increased access, you will know from working with our managers that they very much enjoy face-to-face relationships and getting to know people personally, and that's an important feature of what they want to see moving forward, that they have more direct access to HR advice and are able to pop into the office and see them. And also that then the HR advisors are able to travel and be out in groups, working on fire stations, working within teams and really getting to understand the organisation and the people challenges that we face. They've also talked about wanting to ensure that there is more support for our on-call colleagues. So in other areas of the service, we ensure that we provide some out-of-hours support in areas such as IT that manages. You know, we ensure that there's a help desk that managers can get and staff can get support as they're coming on to night shift or for on-call staff on a drill night. And that's something that we would like to be able to ensure is available for staff moving forward. And also the ability for HR advisors to work either delivering training or coaching to managers in order to help improve their own confidence and competence in dealing with complex people HR casework matters, particularly focused on sickness and performance management. So, as I've said, we recognise that our managers play a critical role in addressing people challenges within our service. Our managers are experienced in managing risks. That's very much what they do every day in their roles. as members of the fire service, and the new HR team that we're developing will support them in assessing the risks associated with people challenges and using their professional expertise to provide managers with options for their consideration. The ultimate decision and responsibility, however, remains with management, as they clearly know their roles and the teams that they manage better than anyone else. So in paragraphs 4 and 5, I've outlined the anticipated benefits and outcomes that I hope we can achieve by investing in our HR team, and I'm confident that by investing in our in-house HR team, we'll see some tangible outcomes by way of reduced absence, improved performance management, and quicker resolution of cases. We also want to improve our access to information relating to HR and casework, particularly in light of the Inspectorate's thematic focus on misconduct. And having a modern casework management system will support this. It will also enable us to improve our performance information that we provide to the authority in our annual performance reports. So to summarise, this report outlines the requirements and options for establishing an in-house HR team who will meet the changing needs of our service. If approved, the additional funding requested in this report will ensure the provision of a professional and high-performing HR team that's aligned to the strategic and cultural direction of the service. It will also develop managers' capability and promote organisational competence in dealing with people challenges. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Molly. Roger.
Thank you. The sentiments behind the actual report I fully agree with, and I think it's a good to bring the HR back in-house where all elements of the service can get access to HR support when basically they need it. So that principle I agree with. But my big issue, as I know I've been on about for some time, is pensions, firefighters' pensions. It is a complicated situation with the calculations of pensions. It's not a 2-minute job like the Green Book, which is fairly straightforward, I would suggest, on pensions. And I look at it under the background. It says here under 3B, HR policy and reward, HR policy development, pay awards, job evaluation, and some pension expertise. It's not some. It's a major thing of expertise that is needed, because you've got the McLeod, you've got the other issues within the pensions to deal with. Within the pension report, which is a meeting in 2 days' time, it talks about extra staff. And there's no talk about in here of extra staff. We had Claire, who was an excellent pensions administrator for firefighters. She knew the firefighters' pension scheme like the back of her hand, and she was excellent at doing it. And she had the backup of the HCC pensions other staff to work with it. Now, what has been said that the HCC were going to get extra staff in to then take some of their current staff who were knowledgeable in the firefighters' pension scheme into dealing with that. So they were taking extra staff on to back up the other part of the pensions system within the county. Now, I don't see in this report enough information for me to support it because of the pension scheme. I think that I want some assurances that we are going to be totally covered. We'll have the right staffing to deal with firefighters' pensions. It's an important piece of work for all of our, well, I don't know what percentage of our staff are firefighters, but I would guess probably 50%, or probably more. And therefore, it is very important to those people that they can get all the expert advice. I accept there'll be one person probably coming over who will be that, but I am not convinced that there is the extra staffing also being put in to deal with it. And I certainly would agree with, as I say, the principle of the report. I agree with the going to option 3 fully. So I'm behind most of it, but I want some real written assurance that the pensions is covered, because I'm sure the pensions committee in 2 days' time will be asking those questions.
Monica, do you want to handle that now or wait till the end? No?
Yeah, we'll go now. I think it will be a combined effort between myself and Catherine, because clearly Catherine plays a key role in our pensions work. But we have, we do acknowledge that we've lost a member of staff recently from the shared services provision who was very much considered an expert and was an expert. And we have thought long and hard about how to incorporate elements of that role within the HR function. So we have already started working with the County Council in terms of people that will be transferring across, developing their expertise and sending them on some pension related courses in order to upskill them so that they can be well equipped to pick up some of the pieces that Claire previously did. As you've said, we do also have pension services and pensions admin within the IBC team. So we have a variety of people who will be able to provide support around pension services. And I will let Catherine will probably come in just a second. But I think if what this paper I totally accept does not provide an assurance around that, the pension services that you're expressing concern about today, I think that could come as a separate paper to draw out exactly what pension services provision is available, and so that we can provide you that assurance as a separate item would probably be my suggestion.
Just question one comment that you've made. Are you indicating that we will have a pensions facility in-house which will be backed up by the county? If we have a difficulty in staffing, or if we have a difficulty in getting it done, there will be a backup to the county which we'll have to pay for, I accept, but will that backup be there?
We won't have a direct replacement for the post that we have lost, because that was a unique post that had developed expertise over an extended period of time and had access to the pension services and the systems that remain part of pension services within the County Council. What we will have is somebody who can point members of staff in the right direction, ensure that they give advice and support and direct teams where to go, and prioritise with the relevant teams that still sit within either the IBC or pension services for the right support. But the technical bits that Claire could do in addition to her role, we won't develop in-house because they sit within pension services, that technical expertise. I'll let Catherine come in.
So I wonder if it's just helpful to try and set out sort of the role that Claire had was the employer pension manager, and that in effect was a bit of a bridging role between the service, the IBC pensions administration team, who sort of are the people who calculate and deal with pensions for current serving firefighters and staff, and then pension services, who are the people who sort of pay pensions and deal with the administration for retired people, and they produce all your pension statements. So Claire's role as employer pension manager sort of spanned all of those things, made sure we were all linked together, and fulfilled some of the responsibilities of the employer for pension management issues. And so in the future, some of that work will sit within the HR team. So, for example, things like providing presentations to new recruits and for people on pre-retirement courses to give them some information about the pension as really one of our key benefits that we can use to sell to our staff. The more technical side of the work, particularly while a lot of it is quite finance related, will sit with me and my team. But we will link in still very much with IBC Pensions Administration and with pension services, and we're all sort of, and the way I'm seeing it is we all step in a bit closer, so we're all linked together well without sort of the link person that we previously had the luxury of having. So in terms of the actual administration of the pensions will continue to be provided by Hampshire Pension Services, and they do continue to have expertise on firefighters' pensions. I know a couple of members of that team attended the firefighters' pension conference. And so between all the relevant teams involved, which is in effect now finance, HR, in the future will be the in-house HR team, IBC Pensions Admin and Pension Services. We'll all work together to keep things going. We'll also be more reliant, I think, on advice from the Local Government Association. So we'll have to make more use of linking in with the Local Government Association. In the past, I think we've had the luxury of, in effect, having someone who just knew the answer, whereas in effect we'll now have to take the time to make sure we plan to ask the question. But that advice is something we subscribe to and can take advantage of. So the pension services the actual administration of the pensions will continue as it has. It's just that employer role which is changing slightly. Does that help?
Before Neil comes in, can I just pursue that slightly? I thought that, was always under the impression, bringing the HR into house was taking all of the pension side into house. But it isn't, from what I'm now hearing. And one of the advantages of bringing HR into house is that Hampshire will not accept out-of-hours phone calls, will not accept phone calls, will only accept emails. And that was one of the criticisms of the staff and what have you, of why we should bring stuff back into house. So, from a firefighter dealing with a pension issue, that problem is going to be no different. They're still going to have that problem there, as it now appears.
Can I pick that up? So I can understand, reading the words in the report, I can understand where you went, because you're more involved than most in terms of the pension complexities. But I guess the idea of putting some pension expertise in that phrase, in that sentence, was to demonstrate that, as Catherine's just explained, the idea of providing someone in-house that could bridge that gap, to be the conduit to assist, and that could well be provided on a out-of-hours basis, that someone you can just say, who do I speak to about this? Now, often, our main HR challenges, the reason why this structure is changing, is to provide managers out of hours, times when they've got critical things happening they need support with now. And often, I say often, most often, pension issues aren't of that nature. They are important, they're not urgent out of hours issues. So that's why, but it still can be facility for that. But just to re-emphasise, and again, I can understand exactly where it came from and why you've raised the question, but the pensions administration is not changing. And it's not coming in-house. So therefore, all that capacity and all that skill, apart from the individual you've named, which is a sad loss to us all, is still maintained. But we'll make sure we work with them, because trust us, I can assure you, every single officer here spends every day worrying about pensions across our organisation, because it is most of people's concerns in our grey book employment particularly. So it's something which we will not lose the ability to do. We'll keep focused on making sure we can provide the support to those individuals that have questions about their pension. There is a really good online portal. I can speak from personal experience on having a look at that and how that works, and the support is still there, albeit it won't be quite as fine as it was when we had our individual that has now left us. So hopefully that helps your concerns, but please don't worry that the pensions will be abandoned, because it's very much a focus of ours going forward.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Derek?
Yeah, if I may, Chair. Oh, sorry. I thought you said Derek. No.
Thank you, Chairman. Maybe mine's more of clarification and extending on Hugh's earlier comment, sort of for Catherine and Molly. I think we can all agree that our biggest asset are people, but also the management of people, which is what we're talking about here, but also obviously the protection and safety of those people. And I'm mindful of a comment you made earlier, Catherine, obviously about the deficit of nearly 2 million and the medium and long-term forecast, or the medium term that will be coming in December. And obviously you mentioned 3 financial projects, the control system, the HR and the contaminants. They're really, and you mentioned that when it comes to the medium-term budget, we may make decisions that might reflect on what we're looking at today. I just want some clarification on that. So obviously we have 3 options in front of us. At the very least, we have to agree option 1, because we've already submitted our withdrawal. So whatever we suggest today, that baseline is what we're going forward with, because we've submitted that withdrawal from that shared service. My question is about affordability. With options 2 and 3, when it comes to the medium-term review, Catherine, are we, whatever we agree today, are we then, when we have the full medium-term forecast in front of us, able then to make different options because of affordability, or are we making that decision today? And do we need to couple that with the decision of the contaminants? Because like I said, people are our biggest asset, and if they're contaminated or off long-term sick, that that there's that knock-on effect. And just one further point of clarification, maybe regarding pension expertise, and I would even extend that to HR legal expertise as well, that we have a subscription, so there's no additional cost to seek what I would call external expertise in either pension or legal costs. We automatically do that, and that would already be in the budget. Thank you.
Catherine?
So to answer the last point first, because that one's quite straightforward, so we're members of the Local Government Association, and they provide a range of training for employer pensions matters, which we can access. And we also, even with the previous employer pension manager in post, would get to points where we needed to seek advice from HMRC or the Government Actuaries Department about complex issues. So there is no additional charge for us to access that support. I think what we would need to do is make sure that more people, we are spreading that breadth of knowledge across more people rather than having it sort of all concentrated in a single point. So in terms of the affordability, because of the uncertainty about our position of next year, it's really difficult to say that currently we're saying this isn't affordable, but also I'm saying that the budget is not affordable for next year, so nothing in effect. We've got nothing approved for next year, nothing is affordable. I think what this paper is asking is for support to include that. If when we have the more detailed look at our position for next year, that we identify a gap, then I think this could be one of the things we could look at, but there will be also all of the other things we're doing in the service which we could look at to bridge that gap. So we do also have temporary measures to bridge a gap if it takes us longer to deliver future efficiencies. But so we're sort of saying that this is as yet unfunded, as is in effect everything else, because we haven't yet done that detailed work which is in progress currently. So does that help?
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Fran?
Yeah, thank you. It's really important with HR, of course, that you have a really professional service that supports staff in times of bereavement, sickness, looking at bullying, all those things, performance issues and whatever, and all of this is here. Whenever I see that a policy is aligned to the cultural direction of a service or a business, it just worries me slightly. And I just want you to can you reassure me that in the if we go with this recommendation 3, as is recommended, you won't be overly introducing unnecessary or woke initiatives that aren't necessary or don't improve the services for most staff.
Thank you. It's absolutely not our intention to introduce initiatives that are not helpful to the organisation or don't meet the services requirements in terms of its needs and aligning to the sort of future strategic and cultural direction that the organisation is going in. We're really clear that managers need to have the competence and confidence to proactively support their people when they're going through difficult times. And that's what the intention of the HR team is to do, to support managers in tackling some of our more complex people challenges that we have seen and we continue to see. And it's about them working aligned to the rest of the organisation and also to the department that I manage, so that they can ensure that everything we do is aligned and supportive in terms of bringing that learning back within the organisation and ensuring that we're able to embed learning across the organisation from all of the people matters that we deal with, rather than them perhaps sitting separately to the organisation and therefore perhaps not being as aligned.
Thank you. David, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just on the pensions point, I agree with the Chief. I don't think that this is something that is uppermost in most people's minds when they come into work. It's crucially important that we're providing a good pension. pension, but the idea of the need for an out-of-hours pension service, I don't see why, I can't think of why you'd ever need to phone it. But a question from Molly would be, what percentage of questions do you get that relate to pensions when you're dealing with HR issues? I mean, roughly. And I'm a supporter of option 3. I think working it out, it's 298 plus 410, which comes to £608,000, if I'm not mistaken. Now, the reason I think that bringing HR personnel in-house is very important is reflection when I used to work for that organisation called the BBC, when they decided they were going to centralise personnel. And of course you can't get hold of anyone. They think it's great, and it was a very inward-looking change, and they had access to all these sort of wonderful things, but you could never get hold of them. And I think going back to having people on site who can answer the basic questions for personnel, I think is really important and hugely helpful, and will help address the issue of staff absenteeism and sickness, etc., etc. And I think all organisations, I mean, I'm a school governor as well, and I know that staff absence is a problem for schools, so I don't see why it won't be a problem for all other sorts of organisations, and the person-to-person interaction should help there. I suppose, and I'm no expert, but the only warning I would say is that bringing HR personnel in-house, it's not creating a chatty cafe where people can go along and turn up and have a conversation about absolutely anything just because they're passing the open door. So I think, look, on that basis, I think this makes sense. But what I would like to know is when the suggestion for us to have a further look at progress and the difference that it's made, because these changes are about making a difference to, as you said, Zoe, our most valuable resource, to know has it worked? How well has it? I'm sure it'll work, but how well has it worked? And in effect, are we getting value for money for that? So maybe in a year, when would that be? It's due to start on the 1st of April 2024. Maybe it should start on the 2nd of April 2024. Would it be a year, 6 months? I don't know. So I'm happy to take a suggestion from Molly about that. But I think a report scheduled in to come back to give us an update would be a useful thing. Thank you.
Yeah, Zoe and I have been talking about this. I mean, we do have a safeguard policy in place already, and that is the people element of our individual tasks outside of this, which is Zoe and Karen. And I would suggest that they provide the safety net and actually monitor what progress is being made.
Whatever works. I mean, I think if we're getting the information back, fine, happy, very happy with that.
Okay, next up is Derek. Now's your chance, Derek.
I'll start with looking straight at the recommendations. Can I just look at 37 and 38 in the recommendations? Where do you dream up the figure of 250,000 redundancy payments, Molly?
Thank you. So as part of our withdrawal from the Shared Services Partnership, both ourselves and the constabulary have to, if it results in staff redundancies within the HR team as a result of us leaving the Shared Services arrangement, because those redundancies have been incurred as a result of our choosing to move away from the partnership, we are liable for those redundancy costs, and that's something that was agreed right at the creation of the Shared Services Partnership as part of the accession agreement. Okay. So it's absolutely, we are working very closely with our partners in terms of ensuring that we ring fence where possible roles for staff impacted within the County Council to be able to apply for roles both within ourselves and the constabulary, and it is our hope that as many staff as possible will secure future employment, and that's absolutely what we are committed to doing. However, if that is not possible and or there are more people who are impacted than there are roles for, then there will be some redundancy costs that have to be shared between ourselves and the constabulary. the estimation of up to 250,000 is a worst case scenario based on if the most longest serving members of staff in that impacted group were selected for redundancy and have the largest redundancy cost. So that's why it ranges from a very optimistic 0, if we can secure posts for everybody, to a worst case of if the most senior long-serving members of staff were the ones who were selected for redundancy, that would be the cost. So until we've run through the managing change process, which is the County Council's responsibility, we won't know the outcome of those costs.
Well, that is a supplementary. That was my next. The shared services, if the paper starts off looking at kind of a divorce within the shared services with taking everything in-house, and obviously now it's been clarified that isn't quite the case, are our shared services partners quite happy with this suggestion, this proposal?
Well, we've been working together to manage this proposal and this change process now for over 6 months. We're all very much working in partnership with this change, but we continue to remain in partnership.
No habit that we're going to work on. Less than 2 minutes.
So we're still very much working in partnership. It's just both ourselves and police feel that this change would be of benefit to our individual organisations.
Hugh, please.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, I spend a fair amount of time as a employment judge, and to be blunt, a fair amount of time is dealing with issues from HR having not run the process properly. So I come with a degree of skepticism. Sorry. I also was for 30 years a lawyer in the city. I saw all the same firm. I saw personnel, as it then was, grow to from 2 people to a massive function. And the problem was that more HR wasn't necessarily good HR. In fact, it was, in my view, quite damaging to the culture, and it became overmighty, and the tail began to wag the dog. So I also come with skepticism on more HR. And I read the paper, I see where we are. We clearly serve the notice. We have to have our own HR team. That can't be undone. We are where we are. But are we looking at the right 3 options? I wondered when I first read it whether the options should be no HR, some HR, the same HR. Instead we have the same, more, or even more. So I'm worried we haven't necessarily looked at the full range, and we've gone with a optimistic motherhood and apple pie approach without really assessing the risks for more HR, and that concerned me. The figures David gave us, we're going from about 400 to about 700. I think that's a 75% increase. Wow. So that's a lot when we're struggling to make ends meet. And is it the right priority? So I've got sort of 3 questions. Number 1, you started, Molly, with para 1 of the report, page 41. you listed the aims, benefits of the approach. Can you tell me that the proposed approach will do all these things, and how we measure that, how we will learn about that success or not? Number two, the finance, we've sort of been there a bit, but it really concerns me that Catherine has already told us we can't have all the toxicity aims because there isn't enough money for that. We're taking another 300,000 for HR on this approach, and you know, my basic question is, should we be choosing HR over our firefighters? Because that seems to be where we are. And thirdly, the reviews the Chair and David talked about. If we are going to spend this level of money, surely we should be reviewing in the context and looking somewhere down the line, 6 months, a year, on whether we can afford this, whether we're buying a Rolls Royce when all we can really afford is a perfectly good VW Golf. I think that was the question there. Thank you.
Chief, do you want to follow on that?
Thank you. I didn't think it was fitting perhaps for Molly to answer the question about whether HR was worth investing in. But I think as a Chief Officer I'd want to come back to that question in as much as I don't think the question being asked of members today is to choose between HR or firefighters. Clearly there's always going to be choices about the medium-term financial plan which we have to consider. But I would ask or urge members to remember HR practice is a professional practice, like legal practice, like any other practice. And so have to be very careful that we don't malign it in a sense that is somehow motherhood or apple pie. Certainly in my experiences, I've got a master's in business, I've got a long extensive history of managing and leading organisations, and the role that an HR practitioner and advisor can have in making good decisions as a leader, as a manager, I think is vital. And I think we must be careful not to assume that HR advisors actually decide, and our managers are, as was mentioned earlier by Molly, they find people and make difficult decisions and difficult choices, and being well advised around people in this current climate about how we treat our people with all modern life brings to us as our employees are more challenging for managers than ever before. Our workforces are more complex, they're more diverse, and they're more challenging for us. Many of our, certainly the generation I joined, had never managed a woman in the workplace. And certainly that's something which has changed over the years. So HR professionals assisting managers and leaders be better at what their job is, but making sure that this organisation, this authority is protected from tribunal and sometimes justified cases against us where we've not managed very well, I think is exactly the right move. But I have said, Councillor Lambert, I think your wise words of wisdom about being careful about the balance, I think are well heard. I'd ask members just to consider the balance between what is a recognised profession and a profession that brings a lot of value to us, but also the difference between that and over-egging the pudding, I think is the point you're making. So I can assure members that this recommendation, certainly the conversations we've had in our senior team, fits the current challenge. It may be in years to come that our challenge is so well dealt with by this team that our managers are so well versed in leading and managing things that that we'll find our challenges across the UK fire and rescue services are lessened. But I don't think we're nowhere near that yet. So I really need investing in this space so that I can make sure our managers and leaders are the very best they can be with the very best support they can get. Because some of these people are very, very busy people. They run out other active lives, other businesses they're running, and they come into our fire stations very few times in a week, and they're having to manage people in complex situations. And so the best advice they can get, I really want to give them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Catherine, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to come in to clarify, just in case I have confused things or made things unhelpful. So what I'm being really clear about is we can't approve any of these things now because we haven't got next year's full position, but we're not in a situation where we're saying it's HR or contaminants. So it's not a sort of, it's not, these aren't the only things on the table, if you see what I mean. During the budget setting process, all of our activities are on the table, and this process is about getting these things on the table for consideration rather than choosing between the two. I also just wanted to comment on the overall total spend of the 700,000 is still much less than 1% of our budget. So what we don't currently have yet is detailed benchmarking information between fire services that allows us to compare how much is that relative to what other services are spending. We're working on that, so I'm confident that in the future we'll be able to give you a bit of a benchmarked position of saying actually we would now be spending far in excess of others, or actually we'll be spending much less. But based on initial work, I'm confident that this amount of spend wouldn't take us towards being a high spending service on HR. So, but I don't yet have the detailed figures to back that up. So it's just worth considering that number in the context of our overall budget.
Thanks, thank you. Zoe wants to come in with a bit about measurement, which I think is quite important.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Catherine. I think that's also what I was going to echo that. And, you know, from the financial monitoring and measurement, we are going to be looking at that in December, aren't we? So that's been clarified. I think as a member champion for people and also performance, so people with Karen and performance with Roger, there's a crossover, and we will definitely pick it up with that, because we are talking about staff sickness. You know, when we talk about the efficiency, the effectiveness of this decision, it will cross over both. And I'm sure my fellow champions, I know how we work, that will be picked up in the informal conversations as we move to April, and then as we go past April in implementation. Maybe what we might need to consider, and it would be sort of this time next year, because April would be when we implement it, so October would be the sort of 6-month mark, is maybe to have some sort of people report or briefing that brings the finance and the cultural bit together, because of course we are also having a cultural organisation assessment as well. So maybe that's either through APAG or authority, and maybe just bring that monitoring and measuring together.
Okay, thanks. Roger?
If I can just say a little bit about, because David made the comments about pensions. I think David's being a new member of the Fire Authority, and I just want to explain to him that the firefighters' pension scheme is not like any ordinary pension scheme. It's a government-run pension scheme, and there's 3 dates that people could have joined at, and there's been some legal challenges which are being worked through, and that's the complications of it. It's not like the Green Book, which is the ordinary final salary pension. So it is a complicated issue, and firefighters, because they want advice, they are very concerned and are very interested in their pensions. Whenever there's a meeting, there's always a good attendance to know what is, and I think Molly would agree, there's often many questions coming forward. What about this? If I do this, if I do that, what's the implications, etc. So it's not quite straightforward. But I would also like to say, under recommendation 36, it does say subject to affordability. And I would also like to give notice of an additional recommendation, and I'll pass it over to the chairman. I'll read out what I'm going to propose. So a paper at this will be item 39, a paper at the next full authority meeting explaining how pensions will be dealt with in the future. So we have a full understanding of how pensions are going to be dealt with.
Okay, Roger, thank you. Let me try and pull some shape into this. Yeah, I mean, there are people in this room, me, who, you know, in past existences have been bruised by HR. I used to have a sign above my desk saying, no great organisation was ever shaped by HR. It's slightly different, I think, here, and I sense that we are creeping cautiously to what should be the right outcome for this. I mean, don't forget, You know, since HMI introduced fire standards and things, it says in the paper, you know, there are now fire standards specifically on the issues of leading and developing people and leading the service. I mean, part of our job is to make sure that our firefighters and our managers actually get the right information and the right structures to do their job properly. Not only that, but you know, there's wide concerns in our business in relation to values and behaviours and EDI and all those sort of things, which all come under the remit of HR. I personally have confidence in Molly that she has the ability to and the support to lead this forward. But like everybody else, we are cautious, and we should be cautious because it's difficult territory. Nothing to say that we may not be able to afford it, but I'm also happy with Catherine's explanation that, you know, we will creep forward cautiously and within the realms of, and it says in the proposal, if affordable. So I am happy to go forward with the recommendation, you know, and I think everyone has come up with some very good ideas and very good thoughts. So this is not the final article, but I think we've got to make a start somewhere. Yes, you.
Thank you, Chair. The worry I have is that this is live on the 1st or 2nd of April. We need to Molly needs to be preparing now. We have a proposal that is all subject to money, which is some way off. What happens between now and April? What are we actually doing? Do we have certainty of what is going to be there on that day?
Well, do you want to answer that one? Because you're the safeguard team.
Yeah, I think that was my point of monitoring it, that the champions will definitely pick up that conversation as we go through. And as a champion, I would definitely flag if I felt that Molly needed to bring something either to APAG or authority between now and April because of maybe difficulties in structuring, recruiting or substantial changes. So I'm happy as a champion that we would have that dialogue and then come to the chairman and Molly if we needed to bring anything further. So that's how I would see it, Hugh. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Molly.
Thank you. Just in terms of some of the detail to reassure you around the logistics of having a team established by the 1st of April. So, and that links back to the work that we are doing in partnership with the other organisations. So we have identified some individuals who will TUPE transfer to our organisation as a result of the decision. So they have already been through a consultation process and we've identified those individuals and they know that they will join our organisation on the 1st of April as part of the new service. There will be some additional roles that we know fall within the current cost envelope that we can look to recruit to, and we're beginning to develop those roles and those processes and are sharing those with the impacted staff so that they know what roles are available moving forward within our new in-house HR team. And that links back to the earlier query regarding the redundancy costs, so where we're trying to seek to reduce that cost to the authority.
So would option 1 or 2 have a different profile of roles, or are they all the same? Because if you're recruiting for option 3 with more roles, if that is the case, and don't have the piggy bank opened yet, then do we have a iceberg heading our way? Wrong metaphor, but you know what I mean.
So no, I'm very comfortable that we don't. As sort of happens annually with our budget setting process, it starts off quite high level, and we're at that point now. It becomes more clear as we move closer to December. So, and then by February, we'll be very clear about exactly what is being proposed for inclusion within the budget. So, I think, given that the numbers we're looking at, we won't be in a position where we're saying these additional posts are the difference between us breaking even and not breaking even. So because we're just too far away to have that level of detail, but what we are asking the authority to do is approve in principle for this to be included in the budget. And then if there is a shortfall on the budget, we will look at ways of bridging that gap, but in line with our financial principles, we'll do that corporately for the whole service. We won't just be looking at the reversal of this decision, if you see what I mean. This isn't the only thing that we would need to look at.
So there are more roles in option 3, and we are recruiting as of now for those.
For those roles to start subject to approval in April when the budget's secured. So,
but they're starting work in April, so I'm lost. I don't understand.
So the roles will be this will be included in part of the budget setting process, and so we currently don't yet have agreed funding for these roles, but because of the nature of our budget setting process, we also don't yet have an agreed position for all of our other roles within the service, just because we get an annual budget and we haven't had that confirmed yet, and that's in line with all other local authorities. So what we're asking the authority to approve is subject to affordability, including these roles within the budget setting process. But we're not saying, because we're planning ahead, we're not saying we want you to start funding these roles in year this year. We're saying we want you to consider them for inclusion next year, because we're taking a forward look, not asking for additional funding for them now.
Well, my point is we currently have no HR. We're starting our own in-house on the 1st of April. We're recruiting for them now. So are we recruiting ahead of that process?
So as far as I'm aware, and Molly can correct me if I'm incorrect, that the TUPE transfer staff are from the 1st of April, and then any recruitment will be for the starting next financial year. So although we do have no employed HR staff, we do have a budget which pays for HR staff as part of the shared services partnership. So that budget, and that will require approval in the budget because it's a change of budget from non-pay to pay, but it isn't new. The total HR service is not new budget. It's the additional amount in option 3, which is new budget.
I think I made my point. No further questions.
Okay, Hugh, thank you. Let me just read out to remind you what Roger's additional recommendation is, that a paper be produced at the next full authority meeting explaining how pensions will be dealt with in the future. Can we, where's Paul? Can we just add that to this?
We can do if members want to. I mean, I think there are other options for how it could be dealt with. I mean, one option is for it to be provided as an update to APAG, or it could be included in one of the papers that will come anyway to the next meeting. We will have some budget update papers.
Are you happy with that, Roger?
I think it should come to an fire authority, because this meeting is streamed and firefighters can actually listen into it. They can't listen into an APAC meeting. And firefighters are very interested in knowing what's happening about their pension schemes. So I think that how it's going to be dealt with, as I understand it, we're going to have somebody in HR within who will be the contact point almost, but that the county will still deal with all the other detail of the pension scheme, but I just want it to be really set down so there's no arguments in the future about it. And that's why I think a short paper, and that's all it needs to be, comes to the authority rather than going to APAC. So it's in a public meeting, not a private meeting.
Chief?
Chairman, officers are obviously really happy to bring a paper to the authority. I'm just not sure the authority is a place to design that process, but happily come back to you with how it should work, how it will work, how it does work. But as I say, the administration is not changing. It's just there's this amendment to some people, but happy to come back with a paper.
Right, if I could draw your attention to page 50 of your pack with the recommendations, which, as I said, I feel that we are moving cautiously towards. That option 3, outlined in paragraph 24, and the required funding be approved by the Fire Authority, subject to affordability. That funding for one-off redundancy costs estimated between 0 and 250k are approved by the Fire Authority. That ongoing funding for the HR casework system of £18,000 per annum be approved by the Fire Authority. Do we approve?
The added bit that the Chief said he would bring a paper to us.
Do you want to add the recommendation to that list?
Yeah.
To Roger's recommendation, bring the paper.
Okay, we'll add this recommendation to that. Yep. Approved?
Taking the vote on all 3 options.
Yeah. All 4.
All options collectively or individually.
Collectively. So those approving all 4? Looks like that's passed. Okay. Thank you, Molly. Next item. Item 9. The safety. Do you want a break? 5 minute. 5-minute break. Stretch. Cigarette. Don't run, Karen. You've got 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, let us continue with item 9 on page 51 of your paperwork, which is the safety plan 25 to 30, approval of stage 1 report and agreement to stage 2. And I would invite Stu Adamson to give this paper.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. So what I'm going to do this afternoon with this agenda item is take you through a report that starts on page 51 of your pack and has an appendix. And this is for the generation of next year's safety plan. So earlier on in the year, some of you will remember the agreement for a proposal to look at the next evolution of our safety plan, which runs out at the end of next financial year. This we planned around a two-stage approach. So the first stage was very much about looking at risk. The second stage was very much then to look at the assessment of what we could do about those risks. So it was separating the two issues out, which have been joined together in many of the other plans that we've done over the years and the other approaches. So stage 1 is now complete, which is what the proposal and what the appendix shows you. So this is essentially showing you the unmitigated risks for the counties of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So the assessment of community risk. The report itself has been constructed, or the work has been constructed under the guise of the National Fire Standards, which does have a fire standard available for community risk management planning. And we've engaged, probably the first time that I can remember in a long time, engaged extensively with our communities, with our staff and with partners to get a feeling of what actually the public want from their fire and rescue service. So then the risks are laid out with likelihood using historic demand as a proxy for future demand, and then consequence given a score, which is as a result of a PESLO analysis, so a strategic analysis which allows us to give a relative score. So the ongoing work, stage 2, should you approve the recommendations today, we'll come back to the Fire Authority in due course, so that you will see stage 1 and stage 2 together at some stage. But what I will say to you is that the ongoing plan is now more of an ongoing iterative plan. So rather than the thinking that every 5 years we'll do one big project, our consideration and our work up until this date has said to us that actually we should be doing this on a much more ongoing basis with the changes around the world. So if I take you just to a couple of the headlines, which I think are reasonable just to look at, you'll see from the pack and from the report that fires in residential tall buildings and road traffic collisions are our highest risks. And that's kind of no surprise when you think of some of the incidents that we attend as a service. There's some very high likelihood risks which come in the form of rescues, and also in terms of the support that we provide to health partners in particular. And there's also some very high consequence but low likelihood incidents, which are things like terrorism and incidents involving transport network, which you again would think is reasonable. Our communities seem to be strongly influenced by what's topical. So, for example, those that were asked during the summer, they were engaged with thoughts around wildfires, around climate change, and around electric batteries. And this seems to flow from those things that are in the press. And across our area, our partners are considering the impacts of ageing population, increasing and unhealthy communities, and the impacts of climate change in particular. And our work with our partners to look at what the overall risk of the county is, not just the fire service specific risks that we attend, has helped us to unearth some of that. So looking ahead to stage 2, the plan, should we go ahead, is to form a strategy for us going forward, and we'll look at things like what the statutory and regulatory responsibilities we have, what guidance have we got and codes of practice, and what available options have we got as a service to be able to mitigate those risks. And we'll also look at what we do now, so very much seeing our effect on the environment. All the way through, we'll be looking to consult with the public, and that's started already with this work to look at what they think and what they feel, and with our partners. And we've been working with the Consultation Institute just to make sure that that consultation is of the highest order, and make sure that we can give some appropriate rigour to some of the work that we're doing. So very happy to answer your questions. I'm sure there'll be many questions. There's a lot of detail in those packs, but yeah, very happy to answer the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Stu. Hugh.
Thank you, Stu. I'm back. Thank you for a excellent report. One question. Do we compare with other authorities in preparing the report, and do we see how we measure against them in having done it? Makes sense?
Yep. So the process that we've gone through and the detail that we've got within the appendix, actually our colleagues from Kent who are in the room helped us out with that. So they give us a peer assessment of our approach and our methodology, and we're very grateful for that, which showed that we were absolutely on the right tracks. In terms of our assessment of risk, there's very few other authorities that separate out their risk from their mitigations. They tend to do it all as one exercise. So us, I suppose, in some respects, taking a bit of a different approach and wanting to see what the unmitigated risks were is something that it would be difficult to benchmark. But what I can say is from the benchmarking that we've started to increase through the performance reports, you'll see that as a key feature all the time, is that we're looking at a lot of these areas within the report will be benchmarked and trend analysis put to those over time. So you'll see that. So you won't necessarily see the assessment of risk benchmarked, but certainly the performance.
Okay. Roger?
First of all, I'd like to say this is an excellent report. It is the best report I've ever seen at the Fire Authority meeting, and it's so easy readable, the document after the written report, and I'll give compliments to those who've put it together. It's absolutely excellent. I have one comment. On page 65, we've got a map with a number of red dots. It doesn't indicate what it is, and I know it's Hampshire, but when I first looked at it, knowing what the report was about, I thought it's going to be fire stations, and it's not that, and it's not even the whole time fire stations. So I think that just needs to have a bit of a heading. That's my only comment about the report. But I think the main comments I'd like to make is that on page 84, when you look at the summary of risk scores, there's 37 there. And I think that if you'd have asked most of us, we wouldn't have listed as many as that, or thought that there were so many risks which the service actually faces. And I think that was very enlightening to be able to see all 37 laid out like that. And then to go on and read the relevant pages about each risk, because there's so much detail in there, which is so helpful to us as members, I'm sure, not only in a capacity here, in capacity elsewhere. So it's absolutely excellent, and I would compliment the staff for doing it. You know, it's just, well, wonderful, and I support going on to the next stage, which will be good. Thank you.
Yeah, Stu, what are those red blobs?
They're just
towns, but I mean, they're
just
not
labelled.
stations. Yeah, I think what they are.
They just label the.
I'll give
the
people a
name.
rough idea of what they're looking at. Right.
That's what you see on most maps, isn't it?
No, I've worked out in Hampshire. I've done that bit. Okay. So we've got David.
Yes, thank you very much. Can I echo Roger's point about it being a great report? I think it really does look fantastic and will bring joy and happiness to anyone who reads it, which was one of my questions, is who's it aimed at? Who do we anticipate reading this? And while you're formulating the article...
Shall I tell you?
Well, obviously we do, Chairman. I mean,
No.
avidly.
But I know that Southampton and Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight will disseminate this through their channels. I will put it on the paperwork for the next county council meeting.
Okay.
Because people should know what their fire service does.
No, absolutely. And I think it might be a little bit too comprehensive and weighty to send to all of the parish councils that I go to. Maybe not. Maybe
No, I would.
Maybe people
Sharpen them up.
So no, very happy to that. So the point I was going to make was actually on page 84, where there are lots of a number of risk areas. Do we think specialist risk? Terrorism is actually one. I'm just thinking of what's been going on in Central Europe and now the Middle East. I don't know if that has much of a bearing on that, and it's perhaps a little difficult to assess, but I'm just thinking maybe that should be higher up.
I think whenever we publish this document or do the analysis, that particular one will change, as indeed some of the others. That's why this is very much an iterative process, and Stu's internal processes to make sure these risks are always reviewed depending on what's happening in our communities, and obviously ever-present threat. Thankfully for us, though, there are other agencies that are required to adjust that risk and inform us accordingly, so we'll always keep up to date.
Just, if I can just answer the question in terms of document, who it's aimed at, primarily, obviously yourselves today, and shared wider. We are intending to make this fully accessible to the public, so they can access the information that's in there, but appreciating that there's quite a lot of information and quite a level of detail. The team are going to look to condense it down into the highlights, so that we'll be able to make that much more accessible for people to understand what the Fire and Rescue Service delivers for them.
Will that dissemination be done soon? Because I take David's point that this could be a bit heavy for a lot of people.
So the intention was to publish it immediately after, but yeah, well, I would imagine it will take that long to condense that. Yeah.
Okay. Because the great thing is we want people to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Karen, please.
Can we have it digital? I can't say the word. How do you say it? Digitally. That one. So I can send it to my colleagues at the council. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
Any more, ladies and gentlemen? There not being, if I can drag you to page 151. 151. To the recommendations. 151. No, hang on. That's contaminants. 59. 59. So it's the weight of the 59. 59. Which is the recommendations, which are that our continuing approach to produce the Fire Authority's next safety plan be noted by the full authority, and secondly that the Stage 1 report at Appendix A capturing our foreseeable fire and rescue related risks be approved by the full authority and published on the authority's services website. Agreed? Agreed. Good, thank you. Thank you. Moving then to item 11 on the agenda. No, item 10, which is minutes of Standards and Governance Committee. Derek, as chairman, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Thank you, Chair. I've nothing to add. Indeed, since these minutes refer to a meeting in July, we've had a September meeting as well, which the minutes will be out in due course, which acts as an update on some of the items in that in the papers. If you've got any further questions, then please do ask. But it's been comprehensive.
Noted.
Noted. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Item 11 on page 139 deals with managing fire contaminants, and I would ask Matt Robertson to present this paper.
Thank you, Chairman, and afternoon, members. So this report updates the Fire Authority on the work and action taken to date, and importantly, the continued action to further mitigate and manage the complex impacts of fire contaminants on our people. Fires clearly produce a mixture of toxics, irritants and carcinogenic chemicals. Obviously, in the nature of the work that our operational teams do, fire and rescue personnel may be exposed to these contaminants through various different pathways. So that could include inhalation, skin absorption or indigestion as examples. You'll see on page 140, paragraph 7 of your packs, a summary of the various studies and research done nationally which provide useful insight and information specific to the fire and rescue sector into the types and forms of contamination and the adverse effects on health. We, within Hampshire and Wight Fire and Rescue Service, have a dedicated resource and a team that look at the internal external engagement which review all of these current practices, all of this research on a continued basis. This allows us to keep a trend of best practice and also change and amend our own processes and risk assessments. But it is important to remember that this is very much a national issue for the sector to tackle. And paragraph 9 just summarises the similarities in our view for the fire sector is that managing fire contaminants is equal, if not a greater threat than asbestos is to the, or was rather, to the built environment and construction sector. Clearly, the additional complexity that it brings to the emergency services is the dynamic nature of fire incidents in managing the contaminant exposure. Bottom of page 141 and into page 142, it is really important to remember that we are not starting from a stop position. This is something the service has tackled for many years, and the proposals outlined within this report build on the initial good work that continues, but it also takes stock of the new research and an understanding of contaminant behaviour and the impacts on personnel. So in summary, about what we currently are doing, paragraphs 12, 13 and 14 just summarise it under 3 headings around our people, our workplaces and our equipment and PPE. So under our people, we have a comprehensive risk assessment, as you would expect. This has produced a consistent guidance document that goes into fireground management and incident commanders and take that into consideration when managing teams operationally. This outlines best practice and obviously minimises risks as far as possible currently within our current frameworks. We have an awareness campaign which staff are very much involved in and the shaping, and that includes targeted input for new firefighters when they begin their careers and ongoing fire contaminant training packages for all operational staff. As you would expect, we continuously learn and improve with our training and best practices, and our operational assurance visits ask specifically about the management of contamination, and the cross-service working group work together to monitor and improve the risk assessment and the mitigations that I mentioned earlier. So it's not a static thing, it's a constantly evolving and enhancing process. Within our workplaces, the Fire Authority is well aware of the funding that you have approved in previous years, all delivering our estate strategy, which was approved back in 2018. A key delivery of that estate strategy is healthy and inclusive workplaces. So this sees the management of contamination within our built estate predominantly focused around the flow of equipment and people through buildings, which essentially divides buildings into separate clean, transition and dirty zones. And those members coming to British Waltham who haven't seen that on-call station this afternoon will see that firsthand. But certainly that's really useful for our existing building, for new buildings, Our existing buildings, as members are aware, you approved funding in a previous fire authority to retrospectively zone our other whole-time fire stations. So that work is on way, with the first sites due to start on site in the coming weeks. Paragraph 14, our equipment. So several items of PPE have been replaced with new and enhanced versions. The enhancements could be because they have greater sort of cleaning priorities, or they have better particulate management properties. So that paragraph summarises some of those as examples. In terms of the future then, page 143 of your pack, again, under our people, we really feel, and it might link to the conversation members had earlier on around the link into GPs, but certainly we seek funding to participate in national programmes around the screening of firefighters, and also look at ways in which we can track exposure, so through digital solutions or interventions. So that's both the exposure of individuals, but also the exposure of kit and equipment and PPE garments themselves. In terms of our workplaces, as I've mentioned, work is underway to retrospectively manage contaminant risk within the built estate. However, that is solely focused, as you remember the report, on the whole-time estate and not on the on-call fire stations. So there is, although we do not seek funding today to look at the on-call, it's an ask that we note that the Fire Authority notes the need to invest in the on-call estate at some point in the future. But the solution for that needs to be worked through in detail. Paragraph 19 just talks around some of the challenges around cleaning, and research and evidence continues to support the need for exposed PPE and equipment to be thoroughly cleaned. Members will be aware that the vast majority of PPE, including structural fire tunics, are currently cleaned on station. There is limitations in terms of how much on-station cleaning provision can keep up if we wanted to increase the amount of cleaning of garments. So therefore, the paper is seeking, in paragraph 21, to do a full feasibility of our PPE management and our laundry facilities, to look at how we decontaminate, launder and deep clean garments, but equally support the logistics of how kit is maybe potentially taken from stations, cleaned somewhere else and returned back to stations. So there's a whole piece of work to look at how that may operate. The proposal today does not seek funding for that. It seeks funding to do the feasibility and do that initial work, subject to bringing another business case back to the authority for consideration. And then page 145 just summarises the future items of PPE which we believe need to be changed and replaced. Clearly these items, several of these items are already provided, so it is a sort of looking at the reserve of our equipment and PPE reserve over the next sort of 4 years and deciding actually what's the net impact if we were to change from a particular flash hood to a different type of flash hood, what would be the net impact. So again, no funding as today, it's purely for information and a noting that work by officers is being done, and should there therefore be a shortfall in the reserve, that would then come back to Fire Authority for a decision. Going down to fleet, so page 147, we've identified the desire to have what's called a clean cab concept, so removing contaminated items from where people are sat naturally to reduce that exposure. So there is currently a build program of vehicles, fire appliance vehicles being built by commercial partners. So our aim is to change all of those vehicles to be clean cab in our program. So again, that's physically adjusting, removing what historically would have had the BA cylinders sat behind the back row of riders that will then be removed out of those cabs and into the lockers in the rear. But equally, there's a need to do further research and understanding how we might implement deeper clean of operational vehicles. So although we can clean to an extent wiping down, and there's various different mitigations done even at the fire ground and then back at station. There is an ask around just noting that as research develops and as we understand it further, looking at the options of how we would properly deep clean an entire fire engine, which clearly would be a bigger, more complex job. And paragraph 24, again, it just highlights that the impact of all of this work and all of this change necessitates the need to establish 2 new posts. One around managing the additional equipment and cycles that need to manage to deliver the PPE management. But the second one, importantly, is around fully funding a research and development post. So we have a temporary funded role currently. So to firm that up, as this is an area which we feel is going to continue for many years, and the service have a desire to be at the forefront of that research. The latter role also provides an opportunity for us to utilise that expertise to lead and influence, including across the wider fire sector and through the National Fire Chiefs Council, where there is a fire contaminants working group that we are involved in. So the options on very bottom of page 149 and 150, clearly to continue to invest in contaminants through our existing asset management plans, our reserve budgets and our revenue position. However, we don't feel that would be proactive enough to get ahead of the curve and to ensure that the safety of our firefighters is expedited. So therefore option 2 is to commitment to continually evolve and develop our facilities, our assets and our ways of working as research and scientific findings continue to provide guidance and new best practice. And all of this work clearly is a holistic approach to managing contaminants and the risk to the organisation. And members will be aware that fire contaminant exposure is also on the organisational risk register, which comes to this forum for your review as well. So in terms of recommendations, at paragraph 48 on page 151, we're asking for the £1.3 million, which there's also a confidential appendix attached to this report which breaks that down in further detail and also provides a 4-year look ahead of where we think some of the funding might need to be in that sort of more short to medium term. So the 1.3 million, which will allow us to do the feasibility work, to bring back further assessments of the laundry in particular, but also some of the on-call station investment needed, and allow us to establish the posts that allow us to keep moving forward with the research and development. Alongside this, with the PPE items, the plan is that officers will look at the 4-year equipment and PPE reserve that's already fully funded and look at how that is split across those 4 years and which items are identified to be purchased, to see whether or not we change some of the approaches there before we come back further for funding from the Fire Authority. So happy to take any questions within the report.
Thank you, Matt. Those of you who are going this afternoon to Bishop's Waltham Fire Station, which is our newest, will see some of this in practice. All the new washing stuff and the way kit is handled, which is interesting stuff. Anybody want any questions for Matt? David?
I was just wondering what the top 3 contaminants are in terms of danger and how often you come across them.
That's a good question. I will pass to Glenn to provide an update from an operational perspective, and then I'll come back to you in terms of some of the exposure elements that we're covering off.
Thank you, Matt. What we are finding is domestic fires now contain a lot more plastics, a lot more of the newer type of material which we're putting into our homes is containing a lot more dangerous substance. Certainly when they burn, it contains more substances which can be absorbed through the skin. So we've been using breathing apparatus for a very long time now, and the journey for contaminants, I think we could look back for actually quite a long time, quite from a distant past, where the journey has been from using breathing apparatus into fires, which wasn't the case. Some of the equipment and the kit that we now have is much better. Some of the techniques that we use and even some of our tactics that we deploy now allow us to tackle the fire externally as well. So in answer to your question, what are the top 3? I'm not 100% sure. And it would depend as well on the fire, what's burning, where it's burning. So it's a kind of quite a difficult question to ask. But what we do know is that most smoke will contain something which is seen now as a cause of cancer or potential cause of cancer.
I think just to expand further, in terms of equipment and a PPE piece, the change, as Glenn says, is around the understanding. So if you take our flash hoods as an example, so they were designed for thermal without thinking about particulates in the air and whether or not those need to actually be repelled from face and what have you. So the flash hood goes around the head. So it's that change in understanding in terms of the behaviour and therefore the risk exposed. And I think equally our approach in here with things like the lightweight PPE and a review of the structural is that trying to move to a space where there is different sets of PPE for the right incident rather than structural PPE which might be used all of the time, which is obviously the most contaminated because, as Glenn said, it will go into the worst sort of situations. So actually broadening out the range of options allows us to reduce that risk. So it's the understanding of what equipment and what items of garments or PPE could help with the different understanding of the behaviour of the fire.
I was wondering what equipment we have to be able to measure and assess what the contaminants are. Presumably that's electronic equipment that we can use to know where the contaminants have got to.
Yeah, so we do have things like gas monitors and things like that, which will obviously identify, it will continually monitor for toxicities and combustible gases in the air. But clearly if the default is any smoke is toxic, then if you have those particulates on you, then even a domestic house fire that previously we may have just responded in a different way to something that was a chemical fire or factory fire, actually taking a different approach to even domestic fires or bin fires or other things is kind of moving more into that space.
Final one was to do with the way in which we feed back any information that we have. I mean, I suppose a factory fire, you jolly well ought to know, or the owners ought to know what's there, so that should be relatively straightforward. But in terms of the domestic environment, how do we feed back what we discover to whichever authority, health and safety executive or whatever, to try and remove the chemicals that cause the problem? Because there's been a great focus in the recent past on furniture that burns nastily and that changes have been made. Can we be assured that we are doing our bit in letting people know, letting the health and safety executive know that there's stuff out there that's producing nasty?
The chief will answer your question.
Well, I'm surprised my team didn't know the answer to this, but the examples of toxic relief effluents are volatile and semi-volatile organic compounds, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, particulates, isocyanates, halogenated dioxins. I'm just surprised. I'm not reading this, I just knew this. No, but I think it's a great example of you can go to chemical fires or you can go to fires involving chemicals, and yes, clearly that gives you a different outcome. But what this is about, this kind of focus is there's ever such thing as a typical fire, but every single fire is dangerous. A bonfire through to a house fire through to a chemical fire. So what the discovery is, it seems, in the international research, is I think there's still some question knocking around about the UK research, but nonetheless the international research seems to be very strong for many services across the world now, saying firefighters over time collect these particulates. And so it's not about detecting a fire and going, oh, we found this particulate. It's about over time, because certainly when I joined, and many people in my generation, you were encouraged to put your gloves in your helmet because that way you knew where they were. The danger was the gloves were the dirtiest thing you had, and you put them in your helmet and put them on your head, which is the most absorbent part of your body. So over those years, we've been doing some daft practices which we didn't really contemplate were dangerous. So now we recognise that those things are changing. Our firefighters now would not do that because of this sort of approach. So I think this report really points towards the fact that everyday fires, if there's such a thing, and this is not for everyone to worry about if they have a bonfire in their garden or those sorts of things. Yes, stay out of the smoke, because they don't do it as an occupation. When you're occupationally doing something like this and you're exposed a lot, that can have, it seems, detrimental effects to your health long term. So as an employer, this paper is really about us doing what we can to recognise that our team do a dangerous job, but recognising we can actually mitigate many of the challenges they face over the long term. Oh, sorry, yeah. So, ironically, one of the things which does cause toxic effects for firefighters is fire retardant. So, which is rather ironic in terms of furniture. So, those furniture regulations are being amended now to use different compounds to actually make the furniture retardant from things like drop matches or cigarettes, but actually so when they do burn, they don't affect firefighters in terms of their toxins. So, but yes, we do feedback, and there was a very active national group looking at the effects of fire and the fire influence, and not only for the general population, but the environment and other things.
Roger.
Right. On the toxicity, at the last Fire Service Management Committee, there was a presentation from Professor Anna Steck, Centre for Fire and Hazardous Sites, University of Central Lancashire. And she'd done a report for the FBU, and there was an awful lot within her presentation of slides. The slides, I understand, were going to be sent out to us. I haven't got them as yet, but when I do get them, I'll send them on to whether it's Matt or Stu, so they could be circulated, because that explains a lot of where it's all coming from. Because it's not just what's in the building, it's the building itself, because you don't know necessarily if it's modern materials being of a building, is you don't know what those materials are going to do when they catch fire. What do they give off then, differently to what you expect? So there's an awful lot to this, but I will, if I do get them, hopefully I will send them on, send them circulated, so that you can understand what's in it.
Thank you, Roger.
So, sorry, one other quick point. Besides doing this, there is another issue, I think, within toxicity, is that I went to a fire station, and I won't name it, probably about 2 years ago, and I was sat down chatting to the firefighters, and we were talking about washing machines and how they clean their equipment and what have you after going to a fire. And it came very evident to me the newer recruits did what they should. The longer serving firefighters didn't. They knew best, and they did what Neil's just said. The gloves into the helmet and such things. And I think there's a responsibility on us to make sure that everybody complies with what they should do to make sure they're safe. I would assume, I don't know, and I ask the question, that would be the responsibility of the crew manager at that station. And there may be some training needed there.
Yeah, Chief.
Just briefly, thank you. And actually, this is where I am really grateful for the Fire Brigades Union's work on bringing to the attention of their members, our staff, the hazards relating to these sorts of practices. So absolutely, I think it's sometimes old habits die hard, and the things that you did for very good reasons suddenly turn out to be not such a good idea. It's quite hard to change your mind on that. But I'm really comfortable saying that it's being talked about in every single fire station across Hampshire and Isle of Wight, and I know more extensively elsewhere in the country. So it's definitely a topic which is on everyone's mind now.
Thank you. Derek, please.
Yeah, I just got a couple of comments, but the second comment is in relation to recommendations, so you might like to come back at the end on that one. But as is highlighted in the paper, this has become a national progress. Do we really expect to take local research and development as part of the responsibility on this one? This seems to be national directive that's going to come out. FBU and FSMC involved. Do we really need to be taking an individual approach locally?
I think that role is to coordinate the national research for us. So it's someone who can keep a track of what's going on and be involved nationally with the research as it develops, and be involved in the working groups as best practice develops, so that can then be embedded in this organisation rather than us leading national. The additional capacity that role might give us is that we can play back and share our own best learning and our own best understanding back into those national things. So we're not just all taking, we're also giving back into the role as well. But it's not around us proposing to lead the national solution for fire contaminants, certainly.
Because one should expect a standard approach to this, I'd imagine, not a local one. Okay. Do you want the other item? The other item, as it's now coming up to 1 o'clock, is very much linked to paragraph 52 in the recommendation. I wouldn't like the on-call situation that we discussed at length in the statement of accounts earlier on to get become part of this particular item. I think the on-call situation is much more embracing than just becoming part of this recommendation.
I think that paragraph's meant to include the fact that we need further investment in the decontamination of on-call stations, not just generally investing in on-call stations. So I think it stands on its own in terms of the recommendations against the investing in stations for decontamination.
Hugh, please.
Thank you, Chair. On our recommendation as well, number 1 and 2, 48, 49, have these words, subject, no, you can read them, subject to affordability. Correct. Do we, is that a term of art? Do we know what that means? Or is there more to this? I was thinking, if we got competing things, is it subject to that word and of that one, which is more important? You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so I think, again, as in the previous paper, we'd have to include this as subject to affordability because we have to consider this alongside the whole entire rest of the capital programme. So, and we will do that again as part of our budget setting process. The majority, so all of the spend referred to in paragraph 48 is one-off spend rather than an ongoing commitment. The spend in paragraph 49 is ongoing spend. So we need to look at this, how affordable is this within our current capital programme? But as you were saying, also, how does this fit in with our other priorities? And I think that will be the decision that is presented to the authority to either say, for your decision when you decide the capital programme, is this included? Where does this feature? But what we need to do is look at the affordability first, and then the prioritisation of that if it is unaffordable. I think the point I made earlier was then about the future. This £1.3 million is sort of some groundwork, which then is likely to lead on to future spend. And I think that is an area of concern because in the confidential appendix there are some significant potential future numbers. It's worth highlighting, I think, that this is not a Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service issue, but I think doing this work will help us be able to better explain nationally about this funding shortfall, which will be an issue for all fire and rescue services. This isn't something that we are uniquely faced with. So I think that's, if at the moment, if we can't articulate the extent of this risk, it's really hard for us to make a pitch for government to understand this as a sector-wide issue. So I think that's also really helpful. But that's the point I was making about it's unlikely that we, within our own resources, will be able to fund a solution to this problem.
If I could come back, should we therefore be saying subject to affordability and prioritisation when we use that phrase here and elsewhere? Because you said that it's a two-stage process.
I'll consider that for the future if that's all right. But yeah, it's a useful point. Thank you.
Any more members? Roger.
Just come back quickly. With the 1.3 million, looking at the confidential paper, should that be split between capital and revenue? Because it is really, I don't know, it looks like to me that some of it is capital and some of it is revenue. And the other thing, I guess, put a plea in that it's disappointing that we can't get this done on a quicker timescale. Because looking at the figures all the way through here and looking at the total amount of money that is involved, I know can't be affordable next year. I accept that. But it's a great pity that we can't get funding from government to do it and bring it forward a couple of years. Because we've got to look at the safety of our firefighters, and this applies to the fire service nationally. It needs to be grasped by central government, I think, and funding us for that. We don't get the grants that we used to get, and I think that is part of the problem, where we're finding it difficult to do these jobs which really need to be done. But I mean, I support all the recommendations, but just say it's a shame we can't do it quicker. But would ask the question whether the 1.3 needs to be shown separately or not.
So when we come to consider, apologies. When we come to consider the funding in more detail of the 1.3, it may be necessary for us to be very clear about what parts of it are capital and what parts of it are revenue. All of our funding, apart from borrowing, is in effect revenue funding because we receive no capital grant. So our reserves have all come from revenue. But if we were to, for example, look to borrow for this, we'd need to be really clear about that distinction. So when we get further down for the funding sources of this, then we can make sure we've got a very clear distinction there. But there's no restrictions on the use of our reserves because they are all from revenue.
Roger, we have, in the letter we sent to government, we have asked for increased funding for things such as this. I'll send you a copy of it. I'll send you all a copy of it so that you know what's going on. Any more members on this topic? Then I would draw your attention to page 151 for the recommendations, which are long. That 1.3 million funding be approved for inclusion in the 24-25 budget, subject to affordability by the authority to implement the 24-25 improvements. That the creation of two new establishment posts to manage the equipment implications and to continue research and development and their associated revenue budget be approved for inclusion in the 24-25 budget, subject to affordability by the full authority. That the ambition to utilise the new capacity within research and development to lead and influence, including via the National Fire Chiefs Council and wider fire sector, to be noted by the full authority. That the funding for equipment and PPE is considered as part of the medium-term financial plan to be reported to the authority in February 24, be noted by the full authority. That the need for future investment for on-call fire stations, subject to a further report being presented for consideration, being noted by the full authority. And lastly, that the need for the future investment in the management and decontamination of vehicles, subject to a further report being presented for consideration, be noted by the full authority. Agreed? Good. Matt, thank you. Very good report. Excellent. Now, what happens next depends on a few questions. We're now looking at some, or will be looking at some excluded items, which I'll read out why in a minute. Now, we can do this two ways. One, you've read the excluded items in the blue paper. If you are happy to agree them, then we don't have to clear the room. If you want to ask questions, then we have to clear the room. So, Roger.
I've been able to raise the issues I wanted to under the last report by not using the actual figures from that document. So I'm quite happy to accept 14, well, from my point of view, 13, 14, 15 and 16, I'm quite happy to accept without excluding the press and the public from the room.
Is that the view of you all? Great. Okay, well, let's then take... Yeah, good boy. All right, so item 13, then, do we agree? Item 14, managing fire contaminants. Agreed? Item 15, exempt minutes from the full authority. And the last one, exempt minutes from the full authority. Item 16. Agreed. It being now 1:23, this meeting is closed.